Okay, let's unpack this. We spend enormous amounts of energy building protective walls around our lives, right? Our businesses, our economies.
We do. We talk a lot about surviving chaos.
Yeah, being strong, being resilient. But if you think about it, I mean, if you think about evolution or even just the way a muscle grows, surviving isn't the whole story, is it?
Not at all.
What do you call something that doesn't just survive a shock, but actually gets better because of it?
Mm.
If you hit it, it doesn't break, it doesn't just bounce back it absorbs that stress, that volatility, and it uses it to grow stronger, smarter, more capable.
We truly lacked a precise structural word for that phenomenon. I mean, robustness implies resistance,
Right, it just stands there.
and resilience implies bouncing back to the original state. But neither word really captures the idea of a systemic gain from disorder.
Which is why the term had to be invented.
That's why Nassim Nicholas Taleb had to coin the term antifragility.
Welcome to a deep dive dedicated to understanding a concept that, once you really grasp it, it fundamentally changes how you view risk, planning, and planning. Well, life itself.
It really does.
The mission today is to rapidly equip you, the learner, with a deep conceptual understanding of what antifragility truly means. We are unpacking the core philosophy from Antifragile, things that gain from disorder, and we're going to analyze why some things actually need chaos to thrive.
And, maybe more importantly, why our modern world is increasingly hostile to anything that tries to be anti-fragile. The core discovery here is a structural one. Instability isn't always bad.
That's so counterintuitive.
It is. We're conditioned to view randomness and variability as uniformly negative forces. But when you look closely at complex, successful systems, whether that's biological or evolutionary, they don't just cope with disorder. They're required to function and evolve.
So today we're going to define this new paradigm, explain the mechanics of how this benefit is actually achieved, and identify exactly where this structural advantage hides in the modern world. Before we jump in, though, if you love breaking down complex ideas like this and using that knowledge to navigate an uncertain world, please take a moment to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this deep dive with someone else who loves one of those intellectual aha moments.
It really helps us out.
It does. Okay, let's start where any good architectural analysis begins, by defining the materials we're working with.
Hmm.
So when we talk about how systems respond to stress or, volatility, we traditionally operate on a pretty shallow scale.
Right. It's usually binary. Success or failure.
Right.
It breaks or it doesn't.
Exactly. But we need a richer vocabulary. We need something that includes that middle state and the state that goes way beyond mere success. Let's try to frame this spectrum.
Okay, so when analyzing a system's response to a shock, the starting point is the most intuitive category. The fragile system.
The glass vase.
The glass vase is the perfect mental image. It's anything that breaks or is harmed disproportionately by stress, by disorder, or by unexpected variability.
And the key word there is disproportionately right.
Yes, that's the nonlinearity we'll get into. Its payoff curve is what we call concave, meaning it loses a lot more from negative extremes than it could ever gain from positive ones.
We often think of physical objects, but the concept is really most dangerous when it's applied to non-physical complex structures, isn't it?
Precisely. That's where the real risk is hiding. On a systemic level, fragility manifests in these highly optimized, tightly coupled systems.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, consider a modern, massive corporation with maximum leverage. A financial entity designed to make tiny, incremental profits every single day under perfect conditions.
Okay.
A single unexpected market shock or regulatory change, even a small one, threatens its entire existence. Why? Because it has absolutely no room for error.
It's optimized for the average day?
It's optimized for the mean, but it's catastrophically destroyed by the extremes. It fears disorder. It has to fear disorder.
And then you have the category that we traditionally praise, but which Taleb argues is just the neutral middle ground. Robust or resilient?
This is the steel block, or the ancient Roman road, or a simple mechanical system that's just designed to last 1,000 years. It survives the stressor, it holds its shape, it resists damage, but, and this is crucial, it gains nothing from the stress.
Nothing at all.
It tolerates disorder, it ignores the randomness, but it is fundamentally static in the face of change. If you stress test it, it returns to zero. No worse, but no better off.
I think we often confuse robust structures with antifragile ones.
Yeah.
We admire the robustness of a great wall, but is a wall really what we should aspire to be in a world that's defined by change?
That's such a good question.
A resilient organization survives a crisis, sure, but it has merely paid the cost of that shock without gaining any strategic advantage. It's just back to where it started.
That is the critical insight. Robustness is a necessary, but it's an insufficient goal. The modern environment, financial, technological, political, it's defined by volatility. You cannot simply resist a turbulent environment. You have to learn to navigate it.
And that's where the third term comes in?
That's why we need the third term, antifragility. This is the category for things that structurally benefit from shocks, from randomness, from errors. It is the structural opposite of fragility.
So if a fragile object dislikes volatility,
The antifragile object needs that disorder to actually improve, to grow, to optimize. Volatility isn't just something you tolerate. It's an input. It's fuel for growth.
to make this philosophical distinction really tangible, let's look at nature, because the human body provides probably the quintessential example of an antifragile system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The natural world is just filled with antifragile mechanisms. Take the physical systems of the human body. Your bones and muscles are not just robust.
No, if they were just robust, they'd stay the same no matter what you did.
Exactly.
Huh?
But they are profoundly antifragile. A muscle requires stress, those tiny micro tears caused by lifting weights, by resistance, to repair itself through supercompensation, growing back denser and stronger.
That is true growth because of disorder, not in spite of it.
And the opposite side of that coin demonstrates the danger of fragility that's born from comfort.
Yeah, the lack of stress.
Exactly. If you remove the stress, if you put a person in a cast for months or send an astronaut into zero gravity, they experience profound atrophy.
Their muscles waste away, their bones lose density.
And that atrophy is the structural definition of fragility. The system, deprived of the necessary stress, becomes brittle and weak. A static, calm environment, which we usually strive for, is actually inherently dangerous for any system that requires feedback and stress to maintain its optimal function.
This principle isn't just about weightlifting, is it? It extends down to the cellular level, particularly through a phenomenon known as hormesis. This concept really illustrates the nonlinear relationship between stress and outcome.
Hormesis fundamentally challenges the linear assumption that, more stress equals more harm. It's not a straight line.
Right.
Instead, it suggests a nonlinear response where a small dose of a harmful substance or a stressor can actually be beneficial, while a large dose is fatal.
Can you give us a concrete example of that?
Sure, think about the immune system. Exposure to a small, controlled dose of a pathogen, which is the entire basis of vaccination, trains the system. It makes it anti-fragile to future larger threats.
So the small shock prepares it.
It does. And if a child grows up in a sterile bubble, their immune system, lacking those necessary small stressors, remains naive and fragile. It might even overreact dangerously to common environmental triggers later in life.
So the response to stress is not simply good or bad. It is structural and it's dose-dependent. A certain level of volatility is essential for adaptation and improvement because it forces the system to continually upgrade its capabilities.
And when we look at practical systems outside of biology, we have to use this triad distinction to understand their underlying structure. Fragile systems, as we said, are optimized, they're centralized, with maximum efficiency and zero slack.
And what about the systems that manage to be anti-fragile in the economic or social world? What do they look like?
Antifragile systems are those designed for change and for evolution. Look at decentralized economic models or evolutionary systems. Consider a startup ecosystem like Silicon Valley. Most individual startups are incredibly fragile. They fail, and they fail quickly.
Right, most of them go under.
However, the ecosystem itself is anti-fragile
How so?
because failure is cheap, it's localized, and it's rapid. And the knowledge gleaned from those failures is immediately recycled. The intellectual and human capital just feeds right into the next iteration or the next successful company, making the overall technological and economic system stronger because of, not despite, the high failure rate.
That is a key distinction. So if a single failure can bring down the whole structure, it's fragile.
Yes.
If a failure in one unit means nothing to the rest and the structure just remains unchanged, it's robust. But if a failure of one unit, that small error, teaches the rest of the system how to succeed, that's anti-fragility in action.
You've got it. It's a distributed structure that internalizes the gains from error. We have to remember this triad is structural. It's not about how much stress something can take, but about the specific shape of its response curve to that stress.
And that forces us to look past the superficial appearance and really understand the underlying mechanics of uncertainty. Okay, here's where the analysis becomes mathematically precise. Because anti-fragility isn't just a qualitative feeling of improvement, it has deep roots in how a system responds to high-impact, rare events.
What we often call black swans.
Exactly. And it all comes down to the geometry of risk concave versus convex payoff. Let's really unpack this nonlinearity principle in detail.
The defining characteristic of both fragility and antifragility is their nonlinear response to volatility. We have to move beyond this kind of linear thinking where a 10% change in conditions yields a 10% change in outcome.
Because the real world doesn't work like that.
Not at all, especially not in complex systems. The outcomes are almost always skewed.
So let's visualize this. Imagine a graph where the horizontal axis represents the volatility or the stressor, and the vertical axis represents the payoff or the outcome gain or loss.
Okay, so for a fragile system, the payoff is defined as concave. A concave curve slopes downward and inward, like a frown. This means that volatility hurts you more and more the further you move away from that stable average. You have dramatically more to lose from the extremes than you have to gain. The losses accelerate way faster than any possible gains.
So a small positive event gives you a tiny benefit.
But a large negative deviation, a true black swan, leads to catastrophic, sometimes terminal, loss.
The technical risk here is rooted in something called variance, isn't it?
It is. If a system is concave, simply increasing the range of possible outcomes, the variance or volatility increases your expected loss, even if the average condition stays the same. You are mathematically penalized for uncertainty.
Let's go back to that trader example.
Okay, consider that highly leveraged financial trader again. Their daily operations might be optimized for stability right at the center of that curve, yielding small, predictable profits.
Day in, day out.
But one major unexpected market swing, which is inevitable in a volatile environment, wipes out months or years of gains and potentially creates debt far beyond that. The possibility of ruin is structurally embedded in their strategy because the upside is capped while the downside is theoretically limitless.
Conversely, an antifragile system exhibits a convex response, so that curve slopes upward and outward like a smile.
Right. For small stressors, the gains might be minimal. But when the positive extremes hit, when volatility spikes in their favor, they benefit disproportionately. Their successes yield huge nonlinear gains, while their failures remain small and contained.
So the antifragile system is one that wants volatility.
It craves it, because volatility increases the likelihood of those large positive outliers. A convexity means you benefit from variance. You are rewarded for uncertainty.
Like a venture capitalist.
Perfect example. Think of a diversified portfolio where 99 small bets fail, but the 100th provides a 10,000% return. That system thrives on the extremes, which volatility makes more likely.
And this convex structure is why frequent small errors are not just tolerable, they're structurally necessary.
Yes, absolutely.
A fragile system, because it's optimized for calm, it hides risk until the moment of catastrophic failure. It has no mechanism for course correction until it's way too late.
But anti-fragile systems, by constantly being exposed to these localized errors, they actually harvest crucial information.
Yeah.
They expose small problems frequently, which allows for continuous beneficial adaptations. It's a dynamic form of stress testing.
And this prevents the buildup of those massive hidden systemic vulnerabilities that lead to black swans.
The system is always failing, but it's failing safely and informatively.
This concept of engineering systems to harvest information and benefit from variance leads us directly to the core mechanism for manufacturing antifragility.
Optionality.
Yes. Optionality is the bridge between the geometry of risk and practical real-world strategy.
And it's not just a financial term. Not at all. It's a structural design feature. An option is the right, but not the obligation, to take an action. You benefit from uncertainty because you can choose to participate in positive outcomes. That's the right to act, while avoiding negative ones because there's no obligation to act.
So antifragility is achieved by maximizing that positive optionality while at the same time rigorously minimizing negative optionality.
Or what Taleb calls being short options, which means you are obligated to bear the cost of an extreme event.
This is the strategic ideal, isn't it? Maximum upside, limited downside.
That's the holy grail. You want to be in a situation where failures are cheap, common, and information-rich, allowing for many small, inexpensive experiments, but ensuring that successes, however rare, can yield huge, nonlinear, life-altering gains. The cost of admission to that potential upside is kept minimal.
Let's apply the contrast again. The decentralized garage inventor versus the centralized central planner. This contrast perfectly illustrates optionality in action.
It does. The inventor runs dozens of small, cheap, parallel experiments. This is maximizing optionality. The cost of failure is contained. If the prototype blows up, it's a minor setback, but the information gained is priceless.
They have that convexity. They're structured to exploit the random, unexpected breakthrough.
Meanwhile, the central planner, who is reliant on precise predictions, designs a massive, single expensive grand plan. A huge investment in one single direction.
They've minimized their optionality.
Completely. They are highly leveraged on the accuracy of their initial model. If the planner's assumptions are wrong on just one critical variable, the entire structure fails catastrophically, wasting billions.
So that plan is inherently fragile because it lacks any cheap, localized points of correction or retreat.
The fragility of the central planner lies in the fact that they are essentially obligated to follow through on their massive plan, even when reality diverges from their model. They are short a massive negative option.
But the tinkerer.
The antifragile tinkerer, however, is constantly long, small, cheap, positive options. They can walk away from a failed experiment at minimal cost and just pivot to the next one.
This dynamic seems to fundamentally favor those who prioritize immediate feedback from reality over some beautiful theoretical abstraction.
It does, and that's a theme that extends deep into our modern institutions.
It becomes strikingly clear that many systems we cherish for their apparent stability, from governmental institutions to hyper-streamlined corporations, are actually structurally fragile.
And they're fragile precisely because they confuse optimization with stability and seek to eliminate all volatility.
So let's look at the inherent fragility that's created when we attempt to control a messy reality.
One of the most dangerous phenomena we encounter is the iatrogenics problem.
Which is harm caused by the healer.
Harm caused by the healer or the intervener. It's a core concept in the antifragile framework because it shows how well-intentioned attempts to smooth out natural volatility often result in a net increase in underlying fragility.
The forest fire analogy is perfect for explaining this.
It is. When fire suppression policy dictates that every small natural wildfire has to be put out immediately, policymakers create this illusion of calm. The system appears stable, right?
For a while.
For a while.
Yeah.
But beneath the surface, highly flammable debris and fuel loads just keep accumulating. They've exchanged frequent, manageable volatility for the guarantee of a future, much larger catastrophic shock, the megafire.
They suppress the beneficial stressor, which leads to this latent, massive fragility just waiting to blow.
And this concept applies devastatingly to economics and social policy.
How so?
When central banks or regulatory bodies intervene to prevent small market corrections or business cycles, preventing those small fires of localized failure, they remove the necessary pressure and feedback.
So no one learns anything.
No one learns. Capital gets misallocated, weaknesses are masked, and high-risk behavior is implicitly subsidized. So when the inevitable suppressed volatility finally breaks through, the failures are no longer localized.
They're systemic.
They're systemic, leading to massive global crises like 2008. The system was made fragile by the very interventions intended to make it safe.
And underpinning all of these fragile interventions is often this over-reliance on prediction.
Oh, yes.
We build these enormously complex models designed to predict specific economic, climate, or geopolitical outcomes, and then we organize our fragile systems, our long-term debt, our infrastructure projects around those predictions.
Relying on precise predictions is inherently fragile because of the very nature of high-impact rare events. A model only works as long as the inputs remain within the parameters it was trained on.
And black swans, by definition, happen outside those parameters.
Exactly. When the world deviates drastically from the model, which it inevitably does in rare high-impact events, the entire system, built to accommodate only the prediction, just breaks down catastrophically.
So the anti-fragile strategy is to avoid being dependent on accurate prediction altogether. Is that it?
Precisely. If you are anti-fragile, you don't need to forecast when the unexpected crisis will hit or what form it will take. You only need to ensure you benefit from it when it does.
So you shift from trying to forecast the weather to ensuring you own assets that benefit from both sunshine and storms?
You're changing your exposure, not improving your crystal ball.
This skepticism of top-down knowledge and prediction, it leads naturally to a critique of the intellectual class and the structures they design. You mentioned the intellectual yet idiot, IYI, archetype.
Yes, and the critique really targets the structural danger of abstraction when it's divorced from reality. There's an inherent fragility in systems designed by individuals who focus too heavily on academic models, on statistical abstractions, on theoretical coherence.
They mistake the map for the territory.
That's the perfect phrase for it. They prioritize intellectual elegance over real-world robustness and redundancy. The IYI assumes that because their model is logically consistent on paper, reality should just obey it.
But reality is messy, it's volatile, it's complex.
And the systems built on this top-down abstraction, highly centralized planning, excessive standardization, massive bureaucratic hierarchies, are dangerously brittle. They fail because the person at the top, or the model running the system, lacks the necessary local, granular, decentralized feedback that reality provides moment to moment.
It's too slow.
Way too slow. The only systems that have survived millennia are those that allow for localized autonomy, for trial and error adaptation, and for learning from small, immediate mistakes.
This abstraction translates directly into institutional fragility through excessive bureaucracy and rigidity. We seek standardization for efficiency, but we sacrifice essential resilience.
Right. Standardization and the constant drive for efficiency, which is usually based on minimizing marginal costs, it removes the necessary localized feedback loops and redundancy.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If a massive global corporation standardizes on a single complex software system just to save a bit of money, one security flaw or one unexpected regulatory change can take down the entire global operation simultaneously.
A single point of failure.
A catastrophic single point of failure. That standardization optimizes for smooth function in calm times, but makes the whole structure brittle in a crisis. Antifragile systems require redundancy, 2 different software systems, 3 different suppliers, localized decision-making to absorb shocks without systemic failure.
So if these complex, fragile systems are often built by constantly adding layers of optimization and prediction, how do we actually move toward anti-fragility in practice? It feels like the answer isn't about adding more things.
It isn't. It's about taking things away.
Destruction.
That we are. We prefer addition because it provides a clear, actionable narrative. I did X and Y happened. It also allows professionals to charge fees for complex solutions. Subtraction, removing something, is often silent, unrewarded, and lacks the excitement of novelty.
But it's more effective.
But removal is often the highest impact action. When you remove a systemic poison, the improvement is structural and often permanent.
I'm thinking about personal knowledge. The fragile approach is to keep adding new, trendy information streams. The anti-fragile approach, using the via negativa, is to rigorously remove noise-stopping sources of low-quality information, unsubscribing, removing social media accounts that generate stress without substance, and just focusing on knowledge that has stood the test of time.
And health is the prime example. The fragile strategy involves adding complexity. A cocktail of new, high-tech supplements, untested drugs, overly complicated workout regimens.
Biohacking trend.
Right. But the anti-fragile strategy usually follows the via negativa, removing known harmful processed items from your diet, eliminating sources of chronic stress, prioritizing simple, natural movement. Removing negative stressors, frailty generators, is often the most powerful and predictable way to achieve lasting benefit.
By removing the things that hurt us, we allow our innate anti-fragility to take over.
Exactly. Our body's ability to heal and adapt, we let it do its job rather than intervening in a way that might cause that iatrogenic harm we talked about.
Okay. Moving from theory to application requires a complete mental shift, really. Moving from optimization and hyper-efficiency to the embrace of redundancy and preparation for the unknown.
And it starts with a hard truth.
Which is?
Maximum efficiency is actually a recipe for fragility.
The economic and business world has been obsessed with optimization for decades, but hyper-optimization and just-in-time systems are inherently fragile.
They are. They're designed to operate without any slack, any buffer, any spare capacity. This ensures minimum costs when things are calm.
But it guarantees that any single point of failure, a broken machine, a pandemic closing a factory, a sudden regulatory change, leads immediately to a crisis.
Because there is no way to absorb the shock.
This is why an anti-fragile system requires redundancy and decoupling. We have to stop thinking of redundancy as waste.
Redundancy is the structural insurance policy that allows localized failure to occur without systemic collapse. It means having backup plans, extra cash reserves beyond the minimum requirement, spare parts, alternative pathways.
So if one supplier fails?
If 3 small, independent suppliers fail, an anti-fragile system with redundant capacity barely notices and just adapts. The temporary cost of that redundancy is dwarfed by the protection it offers against terminal failure.
And diversification is key to that decoupling.
It is. By ensuring you don't put all your eggs in one basket, you decouple the fates of your various endeavors. Failure in one area can be ignored and absorbed, allowing the remaining areas to continue functioning, or, more importantly, allowing successes in other uncorrelated areas to be exploited for that nonlinear growth.
The idea is to have parts that fail independently of each other.
Preventing contagion, yes.
This principle of minimizing maximum loss while maximizing potential gain is crystallized in the barbell strategy. This is the core practical tool for building anti-fragility into your life or your portfolio.
And the barbell strategy mandates that you avoid the vulnerable, moderate middle and instead embrace the extremes.
The middle ground is where the danger is.
It's often where hidden fragility resides. It's the place of moderate leverage, moderate risk, and complex proprietary models that fail in a nonlinear way.
So how does the barbell strategy structure this avoidance?
You divide your resources, whether it's time, money, or effort, into two distinct extreme buckets. The vast majority, typically 85% to 90%, is placed into extremely safe, robust, or non-volatile assets.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Think cash reserves, stable long-term bonds, or deeply reliable professional skills, things that ensure you cannot be ruined.
That is the heavy, robust weight on one side of the barbell. It ensures survival. You have rigorously minimized your exposure to those devastating large downside risks, ensuring your ruin probability is near zero.
And then, the remaining 10% to 15%, the other weight on the other side, is placed into extremely aggressive, high optionality ventures.
The fun stuff.
The fun stuff. These are projects with limited, predefined, small costs of failure, but potentially massive, nonlinear upsides. Think angel investing in radical startups, starting a completely experimental side business, or dedicating time to learning a high-risk, high-reward skill that has the potential to redefine your career.
So most of those small bets are going to fail.
Most will. And the cost of failure is contained and predefined, just that 10% of your total resources. But if just one of those high optionality ventures succeeds wildly, it can generate returns that pay for all the losses 10 times over, benefiting from a massive convex gain.
So this strategy allows the overall system, your life, your portfolio, to become anti-fragile.
Because it is structurally shielded from ruin by the 90% robust core, but it is exposed to massive convex gains via the 10% optionality bets. You are intentionally structuring yourself to optimize for the positive surprise that randomness inevitably provides.
This is so different from moderate diversification, which tries to smooth out the middle.
Completely different.
Moderate diversification might put 50% in blue chip stocks and 50% in real estate. That's robust, I guess, but it still exposes you to systemic risks.
Like a general economic collapse hitting both stocks and property simultaneously. The barbell rejects the middle precisely because the middle is where the risk of unforeseen correlated failure is highest.
The barbell strategy forces a certain kind of discipline.
It does. By separating the high-risk and the low-risk elements, you clarify where your risk lies and where true safety is required. You are acknowledging that you cannot predict the future, but you can structure your life to survive almost any downside while being prepared to exploit any upside.
And finally, a key element of this entire philosophy is changing how we view errors and variation. We are wired to fear errors, but anti-fragility demands we learn to exploit them systematically.
You have to learn to love variation and small failures because they are high-quality, low-cost information signals.
They're data.
They're pure data. Small errors, internal disagreements, or setbacks in a project should be treated as essential data points, not merely problems to be suppressed or ignored. Systems that adapt quickly, learn from these small failures, and incorporate that knowledge into their structure are inherently anti-fragile.
You can contrast a large, rigid bureaucracy where employees fear failure, leading them to hide small errors until they become massive problems.
With a well-designed engineering firm where every small glitch in a prototype is celebrated as a step closer to a perfect design.
The goal, then, is to maximize the frequency and quantity of localized, non-terminal errors.
We must realize that life itself is noisy and random. Trying to eliminate that noise eliminates the very information we need to strengthen and adapt. The systems that thrive are those that have built-in mechanisms to turn error into adaptation and volatility into a competitive advantage. It's the constant small shaking that prevents the system from seizing up. So what we've learned today is that the difference between merely surviving, which is resilience, and actively thriving in a world defined by uncertainty, which is anti-fragility, it all lies in structural design.
It's not about being tougher, it's about being smarter in your design.
Exactly. We have to shift our fundamental thinking away from simple protection and resistance toward embracing volatility and randomness as essential ingredients for growth, not threats to be eliminated at all costs.
Absolutely. The structural transformation required is profound, but the resulting strategy is, surprisingly simple in a way. So the three key takeaways for you, the learner, should be simple but profound. First, remember that antifragility is the structural property of systemic gain from disorder. It's the true opposite of fragility, which is systemic loss from disorder.
Second, strategically restructure your life or your business to seek out situations with high potential payoff and low potential cost. That's optionality in practice. Employ the barbell strategy rigorously to contain your downside risk while maximizing your exposure to rare positive outliers.
And third, be intensely wary of systems, policies, or personal strategies that are optimized solely for smooth function in calm times. That highly optimized centralized state often masks large, hidden risks that will inevitably lead to devastating fragility when the next black swan arrives.
Look for efficiency where it's earned, but seek robustness and anti-fragility where the consequences of failure are high.
Right, so if we accept that the absence of stress leads to atrophy, then here's the final provocative thought for you to chew on.
The most fragile part of our lives might be the very area where we have sought the most stability, the most comfort, and the most precise prediction. Where in your career, your finances, or your personal habits are you currently confusing a temporary period of robustness with a hidden underlying fragility?
That's a powerful question. This conversation, drawn from the foundational ideas of anti-fragile, things that gain from disorder, is really just the beginning of understanding how to apply this concept.
It is.
So if you have read the book, what specific examples from Taleb's historical or philosophical arguments about systems, perhaps his discussion of technology, or the role of prediction in creating specific types of systemic failure, what stood out the most to you?
We'd love to see your thoughts. Share your favorite passage or a key takeaway from the book in the comments below. We read them all, and it really helps us continue to shape these deep dives.
And of course, if you found value in this breakdown and are seeking more intellectual depth and clarity in a chaotic world, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and share this deep dive with someone who needs to hear this.
It truly helps us bring these massive ideas to more curious learners like you.
We appreciate you joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time, stay anti-fragile.